Defiant to the end, huh?
What you gonna do, huh? We've swept this place. You've got nothing. We have guns.
No, what you have are bullets, and the hope that when your guns are empty, I'm no longer standing, because if I am, you'll all be dead before you've reloaded.
That's impossible! Kill him.
My turn. Beneath this mask, there is more than flesh. Beneath this mask, there is an idea. And ideas are bulletproof.
I'm huge. I'm huge. Can I change that? Do I have to be so damn big? Oh, whew, whew. Hang on. Joe, you rescued me. Thank you. Just in the nick of time. I thought, oh, am I going to have to do this entire video myself?
You're looking awfully pale there, buddy.
Oh, man. I'm feeling, hey, you mentioned that. I'm feeling a bit under the weather. I don't know. I just got a headache. I just popped some Advil. Anyway, we carry on. How you going, Joe?
I'm doing all right. I got a family member who's worried they might have the Rona, so they got tested, and we should get the results back tomorrow or possibly the day after. But
are they ill?
No, it was just, in any other year, it would be allergies or it would be just the start of a minor cold. But because it's
2020.
2 of the possible 12 symptoms that happen to show up together in a slight degree, they just want to be extra careful. And, I can't fault them for that. So just try to, say, all right, well, go ahead and get tested and, let me know what the results are and we'll go from there.
Did you just catch the latest Hail Salad cartoon?
I did.
Yeah. He doesn't disappoint our strange little... He reminds me of the wheezing dog. What was that cartoon with the wheezing dog when he laughs? You're like... Muttley.
Yeah, Muttley. Yeah. You and I are about the 10th and 12th people to make that observation.
Hey, if the shoe fits.
Yeah.
Shoe fits. Yeah, he likes to bring the lunacy.
Yeah.
Oh man, Camel Man. And thankfully, thank you, Camel, for not launching that at 11 p.m. exactly, so that people can turn up here. Hey, Blue's here as well. How you going, Blue?
Hey, pretty well. Sorry, that little thing in messages on Twitter that it does where you get new messages, but it doesn't scroll up for you.
Yeah.
Sorry to be late.
There's the man himself. Congratulations on the launch. That when he's showing his work in progress, how long that takes. You can see it in the animation. There was a lot of work that went into that. VOP is a great episode.
I had actually forgotten that it was coming out this week. And so when I got the alert, and I don't usually get the alerts, but I got one this time. And I tell you what, Mr. Moon, I got more enjoyment out of the anticipation that came with the countdown to that video than I have gotten for any mainstream entertainment for probably the last 2 years.
Are you talking about in the chat?
Yeah.
Ah, I missed that. I missed that. Oh no. I'm going to talk about that in a second, but before I mean, I can totally agree. I had so much fun. I think it was Dark Gift Comics had a stream that just took ages to start. I mean, yeah, we were just having a blast in the chat beforehand. Let's say hello to some people. Skip Edwards is here. I think he said Rick was in the thing, but I can't see that. I remember I did see that comment. He was first. But anyway, hello, Rick. Hello, Skip. How you guys going? Gonna try this again. Amelios Comics. Got it. He says, "Hal Michael, long time no see. Great to see you back, buddy." Mo Biggs is in the house. Always a pleasure to see Mo. We missed you yesterday, Mo. Your funny and brilliant commentary. Darren Wagner says, "Hal to the friggin' chat." Hal, right back at you. Black Rose Comics is back. Great to see you here. What's Mo saying here? Well, we patiently wait for Michael to start the scream. Consider backing the Lucent. Take your time inspecting the campaign. There's no rush. Oh, yes, indeed. We can talk about that too later. Jose Garcia's here. Jose Garcia did a cool tweet today. He was just thanking us for doing the show, and he likes seeing all the new people on it all the time, and that was really nice.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, he's got a really good looking book too. So when that launches, we'll definitely have him on.
Oh, right on.
Stefani Renee's here. Hello. How you going, buddy? Lama Giganti. The new Camel Moon cartoon trip is hell. I mean,
Yeah.
they all are. And I love Narwhal. I mean, that was so
man.
good. And was that was Deadwood Dale doing Methwin.
Yeah, and he might have also been. We'll have to get Camel Moon to verify this, but I thought that might have also been Dale's impression of the Kumquat Bandit. He might have done. He might have used him for both parts.
I mean, those cartoons, you have to watch them 5 times to catch all little things. They
Yeah.
go by so quickly. August 777 is here. Great to see you here. Darren M. Did I say hi to VIP yet? Hello, VIP.
Hi, VIP.
How you going? And yeah, I did start on time. We won't go into that, but yes. I'm always starting on time. What are you guys talking about? Mr. Struth is in the house. Great to see you here, Todd. Gusto's here.
It's on time in some quantum entanglement somewhere, so let it go. Seriously, just let it go.
On time and straight. Exactly right, Darren. Felix Haas is in the chat. Fantastic to see Felix here. Leroy. Never. Great to see you, Leroy. El Argo's here as well. Great to see so many amazing CGs here. Fantastic.
Camel Moon is telling us that Smiller was done by EVS.
I've got to catch up. My goodness, I don't remember seeing this many chats here. All right, so that was Smiller. That was EVS doing the laugh.
Oh, the
Antoine's here. Hey, buddy. Spirits Cards here. Guys, okay. I nearly missed. This is not planned. I nearly missed the Camel Moon because I was just watching a stream.
Mm-hmm.
Are you guys familiar with the Draw and Chat guy? Draw and Talk.
Draw and Talk. Yeah, Tyler.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen his show a couple times.
Are you familiar with a Facebook group called ICC?
No.
It's like independent comic creators, right? He was banned off that a little while ago, and that's what set him off. He did a couple of rant videos. He had this whole Twitter thread. He said, "I'm done promoting other creators unless I have like a good friendship with them." And it all basically because he was banned off this Facebook group, and he was looking to his friends to sort of support him, and they all threw him under the bus. It's a very SJW heavy space there over in Facebook groups. Anyway,
so I hear
he got the founder of the group of the Facebook group to come onto a stream. Just now, they're probably still going. Don't go and watch it. Don't go and watch it. It is like you will pull your hair out. This is why you don't talk to SJWs. I mean, this guy's a card-carrying believer of the CG is a hate movement. He's bringing up Richard Spencer. His it is the guy said this. He has one question: why am I banned? Why was I banned? He's taking him on a journey through time, going. He's like he's flipped it around on Tyler. It's like a kangaroo court in there, and he's interrogating him on why did you post this. One of the first things he asks is, how many people of color have you had on your show?
What? That's not an answer to the question. Why was I banned? How many people of color have you had?
I
since
listened
then?
for as long as I could, like 40 minutes, and I was getting red. I'm not quick to anger at all. I'm very slow to anger, and I was just like, this is maddening because he refused to answer the question, and he's just all over the place. He spent
Wow.
10 minutes telling everyone that he created the group. It was his creation. I did it with these hands, he said.
Oh,
And I did
wow.
it back in 2013, and it means... And it's like, no one cares. Just tell him why you banned.
Have you ever
And,
seen Curb Your Enthusiasm?
No.
Oh, well, so Larry David, who co-created the show
Oh, I've seen a
Seinfeld
couple of episodes
with
of that.
Jerry
Yes, yes,
Seinfeld. Okay,
yes.
so he did a show on his own called Curb Your Enthusiasm, and much like in Seinfeld, one of the common tropes of the show was that Larry, the character of Larry, would throw out a catchphrase, or there would be a little bit of physical comedy, and it would recur throughout that episode.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
okay, so anyway, I bring all this up thinking it was from Curb Your Enthusiasm, but now I just realized it is from Seinfeld. So
Well, I know Seinfeld.
now that I've taken us all down that rabbit trail, let's shift gears to Seinfeld. The guy who created that ICC group sounds like a delicate genius.
Oh, totally. Genuine narcissist, I believe. Everything comes back to him and all these created these things, and he's interrogating Tyler. And basically, I just logged in beforehand, before Camelman's thing started, and eventually they finally got it out of him. Can you guess why he was banned? It's the $1 million question after all this time.
He clicked like on something.
He associates with COMICSGATE.
I was just going to say, my guess was going to be that he retweeted something, doesn't matter what, but some tweet that was somehow traced to COMICSGATE.
It was just, it was maddening, and it's all just so boring and normal. Like, don't go onto these Facebook groups. They're just the worst cancel culture people. I could barely stand, 30 minutes listening to this guy. Just, and you didn't have to. That was the thing. Like, you don't have to be pro CG in it. It's just even tolerating anyone who is CG was enough for him to get out. And and anyone who knows Tyler knows this guy is not a firebrand or
No,
anything.
not at all.
He's just a pure comic book guy. I just want to make good comics, and I don't care about your affiliations. He's not CG. He doesn't want to be CG. He's just, if you make a good book and you're a nice guy, you're nice to me, let's talk and whatever. Crackhead is absolutely right. Facebook is the worst. Yeah, but some of the stuff this guy was talking about at COMICSGATE is just, I haven't heard it in so long because I don't interact with these people. I'm not on Facebook. He's basically making out that we're essentially like Nazis marching in the street. Anyway, that is not the topic. I'm just totally discombobulated from seeing this idiot on stream. And everyone, if you like just a normal guy talking about comic books, go check out Draw and Talk, because he's under fire and he's confused. And
does he have a book, Mr. Draw and Talk? Does he have a book of his own that he's promoting, or is he just a good guy?
Okay. He's working on it, but I don't know if he's promoting it yet. I don't know about that, but
He
seems like a really nice guy, and he was totally caught off guard. He was like, for the first 30 minutes, I would have just been like, you are not turning this back on me. You answer the question or I kick you.
Yeah.
And this guy was just unbelievable.
And for anybody who isn't familiar with Tyler, he's got about the same temperament as Clint Stoker, Sweetcast.
Yeah.
So if you know who Clint Stoker is, that kind of gives you an idea that, you know, Tyler is the opposite of a problem, you know, in the mind of any, you know, non woke brigadier person. I would imagine. I mean, I have seen enough of him on his channel and on other people's channel that he seems like the same guy, no matter, you know, where he is or what he's talking about. Very relaxed, very easygoing. Never heard him or read him say any unpleasant thing about anybody. Never heard of anybody complain about Tyler in any way, shape, or form.
Speaking of that is very true. Speaking
Nice.
of Clint Stoker, I saw a
Is he here?
video of his. No,
Oh.
he's not.
Don't do that to me.
And here we go. No, he's not here. He did a video today following up on a thread, I think, that Ethan did. And then Ethan also did a video as well, where he talked about the potential of, in the future, going back to doing or having CG people do monthly comic books. I really should have had this thread lined up. I'm so sorry for my unprofessionalism, but that's essentially it. You know, it would entail starting up a comic book company, like an independent company, a bit like Image, I suppose, and then hiring people to put out monthly books. Ethan was just asking the question, is this a good idea? Is it not? Over the course of his stream, I think he landed on the idea that it's not the right idea for now. Clint seemed pretty gung-ho about it on his video. I wondered what you guys thought of it.
Well, funny you
I
should
can
ask.
start, but if you guys
No,
should have thoughts on it as well.
I definitely have opinions. Well, let me ask you guys this, because mine is somewhat of a nuanced take, and I think to explain it, I'll have to divulge some of my what would have been my current business plans before I had to postpone them to deal with the health crisis in the family, and then also due to complications from COVID, the kids being home from school every day and all that. So I've been sitting on this for a while, but I would be willing to talk about it tonight. It would certainly would be relevant. But since I've already said that mine is somewhat of a nuanced take, do you guys have maybe a pro and a con? You want to start there, or you want me to just go for it?
I can throw out a couple of cons. Again, not con meaning like robbery. I'm not making any pun. Wait a minute. Am I loud enough? My little thing isn't. Oh, okay, good.
We can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sweet. All right. I didn't see my little thing wiggling. So anyway, one of the cons I can see is cost of shipping with monthly. If people start asking for where's my Gemini mailer, then you're getting into more weight. Well, let's remember that Cyberfrog did not ship in a Gemini mailer. It's perfectly fine to use something other than Geminis. My experience with the post office has been less about what it comes in and more just luck of the draw. In fact, I've had more Geminis damaged than non-Gemini, than flat mailers damaged. But then you're mailing a lot of stuff, let's see, every month. So, I'm sorry, you're mailing a lot of stuff because of going every month. So is that something we really want to pay for as opposed to bi-monthly, which means every 2 months, not twice a month? There's some cons in there with that. I'm kind of curious what changed EVS's mind. I don't mind that he changes his mind. It's just sort of strange that he came out dead against this at one point, had some good reasons, which I forget. Said he even said back then that's not CG, and now he's saying this is totally CG. Fine. If you want to change your stance, at least just explain what influenced your change. That's fine. But here he doesn't necessarily explain that I saw, I didn't get to go through the whole thread. What makes it allegedly CG? He just says this is totally CG. So that's a little bit weird. But cons, it's that just becomes a whole lot of stuff, and that we're paying for a lot of shipping at that point. Even with what's his name, Peter Samedi, he's done everything he can to keep that shipping down to just $5. So I order from him every 2 months.
So just to clarify, Blue, I think it started with this thread on Twitter.
Yeah.
And because he was asked a question about it, and he had spoken to Zach about it, and they had spitballed the idea. So it was bouncing around as an idea, which is when he went onto his live stream to talk about it. He was talking about it. There was valid questions in the chat, and then Peter Samedi actually jumped on and said and kind of laid out what the logistics would actually be required for this. And he said, well, okay, then, so it doesn't sound like this is something for us, at least right now, maybe 5 years down the track.
Yeah.
But that's where he's landed on that. Whereas Clint Stoker was a lot more gung-ho about the idea, genuinely pretty excited to have it happen. Whereas Ethan was like, is this something that people want? If it is, we can think about it. I mean, we shouldn't be closed to ideas, but if it's something that they want, what do you guys think? Whereas Clint was like, he says that he gets this question a lot. So, it's something that he has been thinking about a lot, but he doesn't know how to do it.
This is not the same as much longer ago, like at least a year. EVS flat out said that's not COMICSGATE. Okay, what changed your mind? That I don't care that he changes his mind. Just explain what changed his mind.
Oh wait, I don't know about.
Oh, I don't mean you explain. I mean him.
Ago. Yeah.
Right, and so I think.
Sorry, Joe. Just before we move on,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to thank. Fuck Google too. Absolutely, Alexa. Thank you. You can super chat all the time. $2. EVS. He might be hearing a market opportunity. Maybe. But we'll get into that. Thanks for that. Go on, Joe.
Oh, so all I was going to say is that in the Twitter thread, I'm not sure how deep you want to get into that or not, considering your time constraints.
No, not
really. My understanding is that, well, there's a couple of things at play here. One is that EVS is a fairly impulsive guy. I mean, he's got, in some ways, he does think strategically. He does think long-term. But in a lot of other ways, he's fairly impulsive. And so it's almost 3 years that I will have been following his channel. He started it in October of 2017. And I'm just thinking, I started following it in December of 2017. So almost 3 years now. One of the things that I've noticed is that in some ways he can be very impulsive. And there's been multiple times throughout the almost 3 years, I guess more like 2.5, that he studies COMICSGATE, where he will have an idea and he'll think about it maybe for a little bit, or maybe it'll just come to him right then, and then he'll just throw it out to the panel and the chat and say, what do you guys think? And then he'll just kind of think through it on the fly. And so when I caught his live stream earlier today, that's how it struck me. I had not been on Twitter. I had not read the thread. And it seemed to me like this was something that had come up, somewhat recently. And I could be wrong. That was just my impression of it. And then he was trying to kind of think out loud and just get feedback in real time. And that's basically what happened. Some were for it, some were against it, some were apprehensive. And then people were asking him to bring Pete Samedi on, which he did. And Pete was essentially saying the same thing that I was thinking as I'm listening to all this happen, which was that when you're growing a business, it's really important that you don't try to grow too big too fast. And I've seen firsthand how that can happen on a very large scale. I used to work in corporate business, and there was a lot of acquisitions and a lot of spin-offs and a lot of changing of business goals based on market opportunities and negative market conditions. A lot of things moving really fast. And one of the things that I had a front row seat to was a company trying to grow too big too fast and get overwhelmed. And it really ended up hurting the company in the long run. And that's a fairly common thing in the business world. And so what I think Pete was advising EVS to do is say, essentially, look what got you to this point. Think about the kind of resources you have. Think about how much more you could realistically take on in the foreseeable future. And then try to manage your growth according to your resources. You know, it's the old adage of don't let your reach exceed your grasp. You know, if you try and do too much too fast, more often than not, you end up crashing and burning. Whereas if you grow at a level that you can sustain, which means you can adjust and adapt as your needs change while you're growing, then you can manage that growth in a realistic way. And still, you may still, like I think what Pete was saying is, you may still find that in 5 years' time, maybe this this idea that he pitched today, that Ethan pitched today, maybe in 5 years' time, that idea makes a lot of sense then.
Right.
But at the current point in time, the way Pete was laying it out was that he didn't really see that now would be a good time to do it, and he more or less explained why.
Okay.
And
that
by
also
the end,
answers. Oh,
yeah, I'm sorry, I should have added. By the end of the conversation, Ethan was making comments like, "Pete, I think you just turned me completely around and got my head on straight, and I think I'm going to go with what you have just, laid out for me. Thank you very much."
yeah. Now, Wilberforce Wooster, sorry. He says there that Indiegogo for monthly is stupid. Make it a subscription. Yes, two totally different worlds in my head. That monthly Indiegogo was not what I was picturing. Just as we discussed this, if anyone else was, I agree with Wilberforce there. I think you answered speculatively, which is fine. Why Ethan changed his mind is he is impulsive. So he was so adamant against something monthly. He even called CG Jumpstart something that could not be done as a regular on a regular interval, that it wasn't going to work. And I don't even remember what interval they were thinking of, like quarterly. But now he's talking, well, what about subscription? But he'd be employing a few people to do it for him. And it's just, I think what may have happened, speculating, is he was adamantly against it more than a year ago. He's forgotten how he felt, feelings. Okay, not rational thought, just feelings, because we come up with reasons to justify our feelings. He's forgotten what he felt then, and somebody else has kicked the idea around, so he's kicking the idea to the chat. Okay.
Antoine points out he's not sure why EVS's opinion is so prevalent in this conversation. If you want to pursue a business opportunity, research it, develop a plan. EVS should never enter into the conversation. Well, I think it's just, Ethan threw out the idea to all the people, but you're right in a sense that it's not Ethan's opinion that is going to make this happen or not. It's going to be whether or not the purchasing public, the fans, are asking for it, and whether or not it's even possible. I thought you can go into all the logistics of it, and I think it gets to the point where it becomes almost insurmountable. Not saying insurmountable, but almost insurmountable in terms of achieving that in a way that's successful. But I actually, guys, you won't believe it. I was watching Clints thing, and I actually was taking notes because I've never disagreed so much with Clint Stoker in my life. Just because he was just so gung-ho about it. Now, I know the whole thing is like, it's often, called I hope it's a joke, the JK Rowling model. It's not really a JK Rowling model, it's the novel model, the Harry Potter model, whatever it is. You make events out of something. And I know that when this was discussed on the live stream especially, it was like, we're not moving away from that, but just this would be as well as that. But look, I don't think it would be as easy as that. One of the best points that Peter said at the end was the only way that this works is because we, as independent creators, actually have time
Mm-hmm.
to get out onto the streams and talk to people. And when something happens, we're there.
Mm-hmm.
If something big happens, the people who, everyone likes to watch jumps onto a stream and they talk about it. And it's if you're turning whatever we're doing into this, it would need to be, like Antoine said, a serious company to be able to manage this. Even one book with, in addition to your premiere product,
Mm-hmm.
coming out every month, that would take away all your time, even if you're not drawing it. If you're just writing it or even managing it. I mean, that's sort of all of your stream time gone. And Ethan had said at some point, Zach kind of developed this model that we're using. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think what happened is Zach followed what everyone else had done in the past, like a Brian Polito and others who'd been successful. But the difference was he, probably not planned, just inadvertently had already done all the necessary legwork beforehand. The building up of his channel, the getting people excited about his product, the buzz, the promotion, and just, inadvertently discovered that this game of crowdfunding is promotion. It's like, that's the secret sauce.
Oh yeah,
That's
it
all
wasn't.
is.
It was inadvertent, absolutely.
Exactly.
From what Zach has said himself, yeah, he didn't understand, and to a degree, he still doesn't understand how closely tied marketing is to financial success in this particular arena. I'll call it. Marketing is important in all areas of business, but in this particular arena, a specific type of marketing is very important to the success of the overall sales. So yeah, I think you're right, Mike. I think now I'll partially disagree with you in that I remember Zach saying that when he was thinking, because he had previous crowdfunding experience, both failure and nominal success. And I do remember him saying that he studied Brian Polito's track record before he decided to crowdfund Jawbreakers.
Yeah.
So there was some research, but I agree with you in that, like you were saying, the how important the marketing aspect is and the specific type of marketing. I do agree that I think he more or less stumbled into that.
Okay. Yeah, so what's another note that I've got here? So, it's this system, the system that we've got is obviously working. And but they all said it wouldn't be sustainable, and it's proving that it's actually not only sustainable, but it can actually grow and thrive in this, this new direction that we've gone. Me personally, I think monthly comic books is actually, forgetting the logistics, I think monthly comic books is actually a step backwards. Because what happens, and this has been pointed out plenty, is what happens is, even if you've got all the logistics done, it just the sheer physics of the task at hand, you're not going to be able to get onto the streams and promote and hang out and meet new people. I mean, people love meeting people. That's why this whole thing works. And the quality will go down. That's just a reality.
Yeah.
We were actually talking about this, and this is completely not planned or anything. We were actually talking about, if you go back and look at all the old people who we call, the great masters, the Todd McFarlanes and the Jim Lees and the Silvestris, their interior work when they were on, titles that had to be constantly being pumped out, it's not as good as what's being made today in independent circles, because people have 6 months to a year to work on their things. They can spend 2 days on a single page. It's fine.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, it's the event.
Mm-hmm.
The event of the when that big thing comes out. Now I know that the when people are talking about this monthly thing, they're saying it would be additional. But I just don't see how those things could be separated so evenly. So okay, we're gonna have an event here, and then there's just gonna be this other thing that's gonna be churning over nonstop, and somehow that's not gonna take away from the buzz and the size of the event when it happens. I think it definitely would take away from it. I think what we've seen is, what we've looked at, what sort of COMICSGATE was probably the first people to articulate, is that the system, the old, what I guess we would call American system of making comic books, is dying.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a constant, spiral. It's like a race to the bottom, because we're not in the same world that we once were in. How did that system come about? Let's go back to fundamentals. How did comic books come about? The newspaper companies had more paper, and they had a whole bunch of comic strips. So they thought, we've got the stuff, let's put out comic books. Let's put them all together and we'll make books.
Right.
And then, so it was a newspaper thing. It was a newspaper game.
Mm-hmm.
We've moved, and then eventually the comic books start, and then it all sort of stems from there, and it keeps going. And for a while, for a long time, for many decades, that worked. And it's just, and it was kid focus as well. It was kid focus. So all that worked for a long time because we were in just a totally different world. Well, now we're in 2020. And in 2020, kids, for the most part, aren't reading floppy comics.
Right.
And they've got 100 different things that they can focus on differently. But there are still consistently 25 to 55-year-olds who love reading comic books, graphic novels, whatever. And that just keeps coming and coming and coming. It's not a huge demographic, but it's a demographic. It's definitely a demographic that you can build an industry on, even if it's a small industry. And, to point that out, I've got them all here. This is the industry I think we need to be replicating. We need to be looking to. This is the French industry, the Italian industry, the European market. These are premium books. They come out once or twice a year, and their market is thriving. Where do you find these in France? Has anyone been to France? You find them not only in comic book stores, you find these on the newsstands, you find these in supermarkets, you find them in bookstores, Walmart, everything. They're everywhere. This is everything that we ever talked about, and it's happening right now.
So what they call the albums, the hardcover, what we in the US would consider oversized, those are available at the newsstand and in the other places you mentioned other than bookstores, those hardcover oversized format.
Where's my one that I got? It's not here within reach. But yes, the first one that I ever picked up, I picked it up in a supermarket next to the shampoos.
Okay.
So that is a potential end goal. That's just me. I read comics when I was a kid. I took a long break. I was acting. Hadn't really picked a comic in about 3 or 4 years, and I didn't really think I was going to ever go back to them. I was reading novels, and I found one in a supermarket. Now that I think could be a long-term 10, 15-year vision for what we're starting here. But I think trying to go back to what we were doing, what was failing in the past, I just think on a forget the logistics. I just think it's the wrong direction to head.
Right.
Personally.
Yeah. No, I for the most part, I agree with you there. I think that there may still be a demand for the single issue floppies going into the future, but if it exists, it will be very much reduced compared to what it always has been historically. And if it goes away completely, it wouldn't surprise me a bit.
No, I've
Yeah.
even wondered why DC doesn't go to a quarterly model. 60 pages every quarter, or whatever 24, but or 72 pages every quarter. It just the way they were stuffing everything into trade paperbacks and the change in writing style for 6 to 7 issues at a time. It just made sense to say, why are you doing this in so many people were switching to their trade paperbacks anyway. Why were you bothering with floppies other than tradition? So I've been kind of waiting for them to say, we're just going to do every 2 months, 48 pages kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think um I think the people, the audience,
Mhm.
are kind of telling people that they're in their purchases and what they're interested in. Um, everything else has changed. Video games changed. They went from arcade, sort of mindless, action. You just, doing a thing with your hands and you're not really thinking about it, to what they are now. Movies changed. They got so much more sophisticated. The MCU completely changed the game by adding continuity into all these movies. The whole everything music's changed. The way you consume music, everything's changed. I think it would just be bizarre if we didn't expect that comic books would change as well. And you know, they certainly hastened the decline. Let's say that.
Yeah.
By doing what they did, trying to chase for markets that were never going to buy it. But it was probably going to go away anyway eventually. I don't know exactly when that would have happened. That's just complete speculation on my mind. But I think that for whatever, you know, call it God given, call it kismet, call it fate, a bunch of us just perhaps blindly stumbled into this new way of doing things that actually works. Not only does it work, not only does it work for someone like Ethan and John Malin, it can work for someone like your boy Zach, who didn't have an industry, isn't an industry veteran with a backlog to point to. But it can also work for people like me and other people who would just say aspiring writers. Um, this isn't really something that I would ever think would happen, but let's just imagine that it could happen, that we did sort of start focusing on more, it became more and more important to be putting out comics more often and more often. To the point where, like, if you're not putting out 6 books a year, for example, no one's really going to be paying attention to you. Just say we sort of like set up that kind of audience expectation again. Then that becomes a pretty insurmountable task for just the new guy who's trying to break into the indie scene. I'm not saying it would be our fault that we made it too hard for him or whatever, but were that to happen right now, if you've got a couple of $1,000s and an idea and you can pay an artist, you can get a book out there, and if it's good and you build an audience, you can succeed in this game.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we were to shift our focus to, well, no, you've got to get things out like a lot, and you got to bring the shipping down and everything. The price has to come down. $25 is way too expensive. We got to get it back down to $4 or whatever it is. I think that would be an extra barrier that we're putting up in front of new people who don't have a name yet.
And
I don't know,
you're
maybe I'm
speaking
just
as if the audience demand looked like that.
if the audience demand looked like that. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. That was the thing that Clint mentioned. That I mean, obviously he has a bit of a different audience than I do, because he was saying that he constantly gets, we need to get books out quicker, and we need them to be a lot cheaper. I'm not speaking as a creator who wants to charge a lot of money, but I think comic books for what you get, are insanely cheap. $4. People. Maybe it's because in Australia we're used to paying $8, $9, $10 here for them. For what you get, that art and all that stuff. There's a lot of work that goes into these things, but I guess the whole system is saying, well, you're just paying for the printing. The company pays for the art and everything like that.
The
I just don't see how we would replicate that.
the problem is that, see, you as a creator can appreciate it. I can appreciate it. Blue can appreciate it.
Mhm.
And those who are more knowledgeable about the process of making comics and the time and the effort that it takes can appreciate that. But the average consumer is completely ignorant of almost all of it, often all of it. And I speak as somebody who was a long time buyer from a little kid up into the age of 18, and then also someone who worked in a comic shop for a while. And the average consumer, you might as well tell them that it just magically appears on the shelf completely done.
Mhm.
There's just no understanding of what it takes to produce this work. The average consumer would just know that it's there, every Wednesday, and now it's going to be Tuesday for DC and then Wednesday for the rest. But the average consumer, from everything I've been able to see, because I've been analyzing this now for the last few years, the average consumer thinks that the cost is too much for a single issue floppy. Now, for trades, it changes a bit. There are some people who will still say that trades are too expensive, but for the most part, from the customer survey data that's been done, at least that I've been able to find and analyze, it seems like most people are okay with the price point being somewhere between $15 and $25, depending on the page count, depending on the creative team, depending on the specific content for that individual book. But when you look at the single issues, for the most part, of the available data that I've been able to analyze, most of your average buyers think that it's too much for a single issue.
Funny about the trades is they're essentially, on average, from DC. I don't know about the Marvel stuff, but I never calculated it. If I remember my numbers correctly, from DC, the average price per issue when in a trade is like $2.60. So that's 35% off.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, look, that just may be the thing, Joe. That just may be the thing. So I'm just saying, forget even all the logistics, which I think are probably insurmountable for us in this current market, in this current situation, and everything that we know. We do know that people do, will spend money on something that looks like this. And you look inside and you look at the art, and if someone said, "Oh, I only want to spend $10 on this or something," you would go, "You crazy? This is worth at least $25 or more." And I think a lot of people understand that. So yeah, I just think I'm not down with it. I'm not saying it's not CG. I think CG is got nothing to do with how the books are delivered. I think it's got to do with that good books are delivered, and it's it's the treating the customers right. If the customers were to demand it, you would have to continue to think about how you would facilitate that. But I think it was Peter Samedi who said, "Are people asking for this?" I haven't seen.
Yeah, that's the big question.
I haven't seen the demand. Ethan said that there have been people asking him for it, but I don't remember him actually quantifying, how many people are we talking? How frequently are they asking for it? Now, you said that Clint said that he gets asked
He
this.
gets it all the time. He
regularly.
said he's gotten all the time, and he's been thinking about it for years.
So, go ahead.
Because he gets that question, and he obviously he's not in Ethan's position. No one is. So he doesn't. If anyone were able to do it, it would be Ethan or Zach. That's why I guess they got together, and because Ethan was saying you would need a minimum of 2,000 subscribers to even that would be the bare minimum to make it work. And yeah, exactly. So I mean, obviously Clint does get it, but Clint has a lot more followers, so he's just a bigger name, so obviously then more people will come to him asking for things.
Well, and Clint has. So one of the things that I don't know how many people really understand about Clint's success is that he has a much higher level of engagement per if you were to take his subscribers on his channel and you were to take, and I know because I've done the math, and you were to um, take his total number of subscribers and then you were to take his total sales and you were to work out what the average dollar value per subscriber is, quote unquote, you know, this is just a hypothetical here. Um, but if you were to work out, how much money he's raised in crowdfunding, and then you were to look at his subscriber count, you would see that his level of engagement on his channel is far higher than the average YouTuber, I should say the average quote unquote CG YouTuber who is using their channel as an engine to drive their comic book sales, among other things, of course. But he has a very high level of engagement relative to quote unquote the average YouTuber who has a much lower level of engagement. So where Clint has been able to hit numbers with a relatively high sales numbers with a relatively low subscriber account because his engagement level is higher than the average.
And he covers a lot of subjects on his channel. He's done a great job there. He's one of the few people that I consistently watch still after all these years, talking about just what's happening in comic books. So I guess he would get a lot of people who are either still buying monthly books. I've been buying monthly books for, I don't know, a year and a half now. So a lot of people who are still buying monthly books or who are still in that mindset. So that might explain why he's getting that. Whereas I think Ethan is probably, his audience is more made up of, the people who are just totally invested in crowdfunding and Cyberfrog. I mean, these are all just speculations, but there's just so many good things. There's just so many good things that we stumbled on here with in COMICSGATE. The whole gamification of it, the whole gamification of crowdfunding is something that isn't touted enough as being a huge driver in why we get the numbers that we get. The whole defeat the evil and this person made this much, the tables, the tallies, all that stuff, what we can do better next year, what we did last year, getting to 1,000 backers, all this sort of stuff. It's just been that didn't exist before, because the people who were running most of the crowd funds have that sort of anti-competition mindset, that kind of we got to all help each other out mindset, which we all know isn't fantastic free market capitalism.
Well, that and people like Clint go beyond the what do you say, that the rage propaganda. He does more. It's because of all the other topics he covers and his I don't know, mashed potato personality, which I favor. That he just, it's not all about hitting the SJWs. Yes, that gets some attention, but then he moves on to something positive that you want. That really works in his favor.
Yeah, it's a positive YouTube channel, which I think is better for long-term, sustainable growth and engagement, as you were discussing there, Joe.
Would you guys be interested in hearing a theoretical way that a CG person, under the right circumstances, could put out a 48-page book every month?
Lots of amphetamines. That's my theory.
Now, I will preface this by saying it requires a very particular set of circumstances in order for it to work. I have theoretically worked this out for myself on paper, and theoretically, this is the path I would be on if I didn't have to deal with the real life complications that I mentioned at the start of the show that delayed my own business plans for quite some time. But essentially, it's this, and I'll just give you the very brief version of it. Is that it would not be now. This is an unconventional approach. It would not be the same title being released every month.
Okay.
It would essentially be you have, let's say, 2 to maybe 3 titles, okay? And you're spacing out, you're doing some of the work up front, and then you have your artistic teams, your creative teams, I should say, depending on how you do it. And it almost has to be a writer and or editor in charge of the company, quote unquote, to make this happen. Because I don't see how an artist could do it if they're drawing their own stuff. They would have to bring in other artists. I don't see any other way around it. But for myself as a writer / editor, I could theoretically pull this off, but it would take a number of years. It would take a number of years, and what it would entail is that you would have a gradual build-up, gradual success, so that you are increasing your sales campaign over campaign. You are increasing your customer base campaign by campaign. And assuming that you could maintain that sort of steady growth, you could then bring on an additional creative team. You continue growing steadily to the point where you can bring on an additional creative team. So if you do it right and you schedule it right and you stay on top of it, you can actually have eventually, after about 5 years or so of sustained growth, whether that's all 5 years in one shot or whether it takes you 10 years to get to that point, I don't know. It depends on a lot of variables. However, if you can get it rolling to a certain level, you could theoretically have a 48-page book coming out every month. However, you would be working with 2 to 3 to 4 titles. And so as a customer, if you were a customer of this theoretical company, you would still have to wait, X number of months in between volume 1 and volume 2 of title A. But if you were interested in title A, title B, and title C, you could receive a 48-page book every month.
That's sort of like almost what Zach is working towards.
It's similar to what he's trying to work towards.
T Bear, tell them all they're wrong.
I've seen what it takes to make a monthly comic, a 22 or 20-page book, and I don't see anybody in COMICSGATE having that kind of time and dedication to do it. You would have to put a machine together, and a lot of people that were committed to it, and just the level of overhead to pull it off. I don't see it happening, man. I don't see anybody having that kind of
on top of that,
yeah.
Even if you could do all that, even if you could, on top of that, what you're doing is you would have to divorce yourself from this, what we're doing right now. You wouldn't have time to just pop on, hey, send me a link, I've got an opinion on this, and have a chat for half an hour. That's gone. You wouldn't have time to do, 5-hour streams, 6-hour streams, you get drunk and hang out and get to know the people in the chat. That's all gone. And that's why this all works. It can't just be having the good books. We see good books all the time. Go on to Kickstarter. There's plenty of good books on Kickstarter. And they're making $1,100. And it's a team of 4 people who've sunk 6 months into it.
Yeah, I don't think the answer is create a franchise and water down the IP. You know what I mean? Like the things that we're doing, like Lucent. When you buy a Lucent book, it's Michael Bancroft. When you buy a Black and White or Chrono Mechanics book, it's R.T. Bear. When you buy a Cyberfrog book, it's Ethan Van Sciver. So I do think eventually there's going to be people that are brought in to help out. putting these books together, but I don't see it coming out in any kind of monthly fashion. Maybe somebody will be able to do it if they're so, I don't know, inclined to do it. I'm not saying it can't be done, but the level of money and everything. I mean, think about what was it, CrossGen? They want to put out monthly books. They created a studio. They had an overhead. They have editors, art directors, all kinds of people that it would take to run a publishing company. And within a couple years, they got in over their head financially and had to close their doors. I've seen that happen more often than not with people trying to create publishing companies or try to put out monthly books like that. And man, I mean, if somebody can do it, more power to them. But I don't see it happening. And I agree with Michael. I think this is the thing, right? What we're doing.
That's another thing. This is another thing I hadn't thought about, but I thought about in the past, but just struck me again right now. You, like Antoine said earlier, and like you said just now, you would need a publishing company. You would need a company of people, overheads, all that sort of stuff. Now, what comes with companies? People. Lots of different people, lots of different ideas, lots of different opinions, lots of different vectors.
Okay, let's back
disagreement.
Yes, problems.
And exactly, lots of different vectors. Now, what happens in COMICSGATE every 3 to 4 months? Someone has a beef with someone. And that is not a problem here because you can always just go to your own corner and continue on, and it's all fine. It all washes over in a week. Or whatever. When there's companies involved, this is the band issue. When you try to keep a band together for a long time, that resentment builds up, and you're forced to work with each other all the time, and then the crash happens. This is why this whole thing works, because we're independent. We get to hang out with whoever we want to hang out with, and if we don't like someone, we just step aside. We're not forced to work with them because we're in the same publishing company and we have an editor telling us you got to do this and that, because that is what would be needed were we to sort of head down that road.
I'm hearing some things that aren't necessarily part of what Joe proposed. Joe.
No, this isn't more about what Joe proposed. This is more of the general.
But Joe did propose that in his idea of, let's say, 3 titles rotating, so 4 times a year. That it would be run by a writer, not an artist, and then that writer, because of the time taken with writing, may have time to do the publicity that or the discussions like we're having now. Mm-hmm. But then
an artist still would not have.
You wouldn't end up with that. Yeah, the artists don't have it, but you wouldn't end up with that. Cross-pollination fighting between bands, because you're on one book working with the writer as editor or as publisher or something like that, rather than having to work with everybody else in the company. So what I understood from Joe's model was that each title would be segregated from each other.
Right.
Well, if somebody is so inclined, I mean, I never say never. If somebody's so inclined and they have that kind of drive and that's what they want to do, more power to them. But also the thing to think about is if you have one book and it doesn't do well, you can turn on a dime and then you can go into a different direction. If you have a line of books, you have things set up in months in advance. So you have more chance to go belly up in that kind of business model than you do what we are doing right now, because you have way more overhead invested in these books. Also, to make it work, you'd have to have deep pockets because you have to have capital to get ahead of schedule. So you need money that you can pay out to creative teams to manufacture these books in advance. So usually publishing schedules are 3 months in advance. So you would have to have at least 3 issues of every line of books in the can before you even launch them, to give you and the team, the creative team, some time, wiggle room to put the next book together, and so on and so forth. I'll tell you right now, the monthly grind is a bitch, and every day you're behind, it compounds the next month. So if you're a day behind and you never catch up on that day, then it goes into the next month. So now you're a day behind. If you go 2 days behind that next month, now you're 3 days behind, and so on and so forth. It keeps compounding unless you can somehow subtract that and do more work to make up for that lost time. Then you're always under the gun. And I don't know, you would have to hire like a skilled professional, somebody who really knows the industry and knows how to stay on this stuff. And you'd have to work with really good people. You know what I mean? Like people that no matter what are going to deliver these books, because the level of dedication to pull something like that off is phenomenal.
Well, that's the thing. So you got all these logistical issues. To me, I say probably insurmountable. That's my opinion.
I agree.
So all of this together, and then you do get it all. Why? Why do you want to do it? Like, what's the benefit here? You know, are people really asking for that much content all the time? You know, in a massive industry, maybe there's room for it, but we've already got people going, there's too many CG books. I can't keep track of it. So I just
I totally understand everything you just laid out on its own. I want to apply that to Joe's model, where it's one title per month, and the same title comes out. If a title continues, it comes out only every 3 or 4 months. So does that not present some of the same problems you just named, or do you still run into them?
It would present the same problems. It would just have more wiggle room, you know, in between the books.
Right. So the biggest there are a couple of big differences between trying to do one title 10 to 12 issues a year versus the model that I propose might theoretically work. And one of the differences would be that instead of trying to launch a company where you're trying to launch with all of those books, the model that I proposed would state that it's one step after another, and the customer demand, along with some other variables, quite a lot of variables, frankly, would dictate how far along that path you could go. So if you're starting with one book once a year and you're trying to eventually work up to a point where you could theoretically have a 48-page book coming out every month, even though it's not all within the same title, there's a lot of stuff that would have to go right. And as I had mentioned once before, it's not like you could go from 0 to a 48-page every book every month in 5 years. It might take you 10 years. It might take you 20 years. You might not ever get there. You might only be able to do one 48-page book twice a year. All I'm proposing is that there could be some out-of-the-box thinking that might allow somebody to essentially produce more than what they initially thought they could. However, the caveat being it has to almost certainly be a writer and or editor, because if you're an artist drawing it all yourself, like you, Mike, and you, Art, would be doing, obviously you're constrained by your drawing time. And people are going to want to see the books that you guys draw. They're not going to want to see necessarily with the same amount of demand a book that is your property but drawn by someone else.
Well, my thing is like Michael said, why would you do it? And the only reason I can see why you would do this is to try to monopolize. Like that's why Marvel and DC publish so many books. So you would try to dominate with numbers. You know what I mean? Like with amount. But the thing is, it's production books versus creator-owned books. You know what I mean? Like you would become a production company and you would put out volumes of books versus creator-owned, like individual, what do you call that? Like independent books, like that are very personal, that are very, individual driven. So you would be looking at like making corporate books like Marvel and DC versus something that is more, creator oriented and more event oriented. So, you would be talking about two different things. And I don't know if crowdfunding would then even work at that point? It seems like then you would just be a full-on
Well,
production.
that I think the whole thing was it wouldn't be crowdfunding necessarily. It would be subscription based at that point.
Oh,
So
okay.
you would subscribe, say, Ethan was throwing out numbers, but obviously this is just old speculation. You would maybe do $100 to $125 a year, and you would get X number of books for that. But then, of course, you run into shipping costs because it's plus shipping, and
Which
I mean,
really,
the logistics side of it is.
yeah, that really is what Peter Simeti already does. He every year
Yeah.
he says, what you can, and I think he trims it down at the half year that you can subscribe to the remainder of the year ahead of time.
So is that what you were talking about, Joe, a subscription, or was it still with crowdfunding?
Well, so what I was thinking of would be starting out certainly with crowdfunding, but then it would be subject to market forces, the primary one being customer demand. So all of this would have to have backer support, up to a point. If you could build your customer base large enough and they'd be willing and possibly even wanting to go to a subscription model, then you could theoretically do that successfully. But this would all be predicated on backer support from step 1 all the way to step 100,
Yeah,
and at any point you'd have to be able, as the business owner / project manager, you'd have to be willing to say, okay, well, if the backer support isn't there, then I'm not going to try and take that step. So that's where I was saying a little bit earlier in the conversation. I'm not sure yet, Art, if you had joined or if this was before you had joined, but I had said that if somebody were to try to pull this off, they would still have to understand that if the backers support is not there, then they could be limited at any point along that theoretical path and have to say, okay, this is what my backers are willing to support and not more. So this is where I'm going to kind of stay for the time being.
and
I
I
don't know,
think
man, it sounds
yeah.
like
See, that's that comic books as floppies, they're monthly periodicals. It's the kind of periodical model, as opposed to the Harry Potter model, or releasing an album model, or putting out I don't know, whatever it is. But where it seems to be constantly trying to push against that natural wave of dropping readers each issue. That seems to be the constant concern, and that's just the natural trend that periodicals follow. And then you've got to somehow push back against that and get it to go in the opposite direction. Whereas, with this, if you look back to Brian Pulido, almost every time it's like slowly growing over the thing. And then CG, almost all creators, as long as they don't do a big stuff up, it's the natural progression is growth. And you've got to actually stuff it up to go, to push against the natural progression. You've got to actually make serious mistakes and missteps to go against the natural progression. So I think that's, a huge factor in this, that, they get the 1, 2, 3, the readers start dropping off. Normally.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Brian Pulido, because he's actually the one who inspired me to start thinking along those lines of, could this even be done? Because if you look at what he's done, he started out with Lady Death, just one Lady Death campaign. And then he eventually moved it to the point where there was 2 Lady Death campaigns. And then he introduced this other character, La Muerta. And now I think he's doing 2 Lady Death campaigns per year and 2 La Muerta campaigns per year. And his La Muerta campaigns don't bring in as much as the Lady Death campaigns. But what it does is it still brings in a profit while giving space in between the production of the Lady Death volumes. And so I'm going to be watching Brian Pulido as the one who has gotten closest to this hypothetical model that I presented, where I could see the possibility where if he has the backer support, and his last campaign launch tells me he still has not only the solid backer base that everybody needs and wants, but he continues to add people to his base, so that every campaign launch, he's getting higher and higher numbers within those first 48 hours. So
but I think key would also be you have to create something that resonates, that becomes popular.
Agreed.
Like if you don't have that, then you can't do any of these things.
Agreed. 100%.
If you can't sell it and you don't have the property, then you can't do any of these things. And I saw Extreme Studios and a lot of those image studios that came out in the day. They had millions of dollars and they still couldn't put out monthly product. You know, I'm not saying that it can't be done, but they had a staff of people that were still hard pressed to get things out on time.
So I think
this is one team every 3 months, and yeah, I could still see where things would fault there, or like I expect 6 volumes from Michael here, but you know, if you're going to be like the Image model, then you put out all these miniseries because Mike's crowdfund here essentially is a miniseries. You run into that problem. What I hear you doing, Joe, is you're thinking ahead to the natural endpoint of what Polito has worked towards and what Zach has started working towards. Although Zach then throws in all these extra weird things like the story of No that messes up his rotation, and Zach may even be a little too fast, which is why I'm bringing this up. So what Zach was moving towards is what you're proposing. You're just sort of jumping to the point. Only I find that when I get told Jawbreakers is being shipped, by the way, here's the next campaign, it's too quick. So, and that, you know, and of course I get books 3 weeks after everybody else.
And then what we're talking about here is more still within crowdfunding scene. Whereas I think what started this discussion was a discussion about a subscription service where you subscribe to something and you get monthly releases, which is, you know, the sort of the main difference that we're talking about. I just got to point out, thank you, Scotsman TV, buddy. $4.99. He says, monthly is a rough grind. I learned back when I assisted Marlowe and Sean Parsons, and I know Art remembers when deadlines loom, everyone grabs a quill.
I trained both those guys, Marlowe and Sean.
Now, and Joe, in your model, would I be able to subscribe? Because let's get off the crowdfunding, like Mike just said. Would I be able to subscribe to only one title, or are you thinking, you know, somebody has to just subscribe to all 3 or 4?
Well, I had not factored in a subscription service into my theoretical model. That was introduced to me today.
Okay.
So for me, it would all come down to backer interest. If the backer interest was there, then I'd be open to it. But if it wasn't there, then I wouldn't try to implement it.
I think the more realistic is you know, like the Brian Polito model, where you put out the book and see if it connects, you know, and if it connects, then you keep putting out the book and you keep building, and then once it gets to a certain level, then you know you start trying to put it out, like instead of once or twice a year, maybe 4 times a year, and then maybe you have some spin-off books to keep going. You know, and then you can build that way. But I guess what I was thinking, that somebody would just like create this business model, not gradually go to it, just like, here it is, we're going to start putting out periodicals every month, you know, kind of thing. And I don't see that happening ever. There's no real proof of it happening, you know, throughout the decades. You know what I mean? Like there's been a few like Image Comics, but Image Comics was they already had like those numbers. They already had that popularity. There was 7 guys at the top of their careers and top of the industry, and brought a bunch of other top guys over and started a company. That's way different than just starting, you know, a company based on maybe not a lot of people knowing who you are, a lot of IPs that no one knows what those IPs are, you know, things like that, like a CrossGen or something like that, and then trying to build it from scratch. I don't ever see that happening. And then just to, like, if it is Zach or if it's Ethan Van Sciver, those guys have deep pockets that they could possibly do stuff more like the Brian Polito model. You know what I mean? Where they could, if they can only do 1 book a month, you know, like a year themselves, then maybe Ethan can hire people to do another like Cyber Frog. So you get one Cyber Frog from him every year, right? But then maybe you get a 4-issue miniseries drawn by somebody else that comes out quarterly. You know what I mean? So I can see that type of stuff happening.
Or
Yeah, when he
it also
brought that
sounds like
up,
trying to start it all at once wouldn't work, and that, like I said, you're just getting to the end point, Joe. That yeah, I think it could work. Disagreeing with Art, but only so. Caveat on disagreeing with you, sir. It could work, but only if it's something that's accidentally grown into.
Right.
Like,
Right. Yep.
yeah, when Ethan brought that up, pretty much everyone said, "I back Cyberfrog because of you." And even Peter Simeti brought that up to him, and Ethan kind of chuckled it off. But you know, it is true, and Vinny's been saying it here in the chat as well. You know, people buy his books to back his art, and I'm sure it's the same with you, Art. And you know, that seems to be the recurring thread. You know, it's going to be interesting. John Malin has he's sort of passed his graveyard shift off to well, not it always was with Mark Polton. So it's not like he's completely handballed it, but you know, he's not the artist on it, is what I'm saying. So he's given that to Rob Willis and Aaron Alfecci. So it'll be interesting to see. You know, it doesn't appear to have affected, you know, him in any way. But I mean, I guess that's going to be on a case by case basis.
Yeah, and then we'll see how people like that book. You know, if people like, you know, that new version of the book with the new artists on it, then you know it can have a life. If people reject it, you know, when they get the book and they're like they're you know, they hate it, then you know, then John's going to have to rethink, you know, and maybe come back and start drawing the book or do something else, you know, to get the attention back. But those are things like, it's funny because, and the great part is like what we're talking about, like with CG, is we're talking about long-term growth now. We're not talking about just like putting a book out and see how it does. I mean, we're actually talking about long-term, you know, growth. And this is a good conversation to be having right now, you know, that there are creative minds thinking about how they can put out more product and entertain people. You know, on a more regular basis. But but there is one thing I think you were hinting at, Michael, is that there is a saturation level too, because you know, if you have somebody like Ethan, and he can generate that kind of attention, then you know, it's almost like he becomes Marvel or something like that, right? So then it's like Marvel versus Valiant. So like, let's say that I'm Valiant and then, you know, he's Marvel. So then he'll always have a bigger market share. And then the more books that he can put out, you know, then it becomes one of those like what Marvel and DC are doing right now, where they're just kind of like, there's one pie and they're just trying to get as many pieces of that as possible by saturating the marketplace, you know, basically taking that dollar out of somebody else's pocket and bringing it over into their, like, this wouldn't be a publishing company per se, it would be more of a, like a franchise, you know what I mean? It'd be like more the Cyberfrog franchise or the Black and White franchise or the Lucent franchise or whatever it would be. And I do think that it could quite possibly have ripples as far as saturation problems, you know what I mean? Because unless we can then grow COMICSGATE beyond it to accommodate all these new books, then we're really relying on the same, then we're going to get into the same problem that the industry is in, you know what I mean? Because there's a saturation point, and if you saturate it with so many books and you don't build the fan base, then you bottom out. And so that's what I could see as the ultimate problem here, you know, if any.
Well, you know, one thing that, well, up on top of many things that we have as our advantage, is what has been brought up a lot in the chat and a bit here on the panel as well, is that we are all independent publishers, every one of us. And, you know, we can all do it whatever's best for us in our specific circumstance. No one's circumstance is quite the same. So your you're an industry veteran, Art. So is Ethan Van Sciver, but Ethan Van Sciver has 137,000 YouTube followers, and
Right.
it's a different history with the whole SJW stuff. And then there's people like me, and then there's people who are just I get messages sometimes from people who are saying, I want to do a comic. I've never done one before, and I really love watching your shows because I get to see what goes into it and everything. There's people like that. Everyone's going to have their own way of doing it, and that's one of our biggest advantages, because we don't know what's going to need to be done over the next 5 years. But who's going to be able to handle what needs to be done? It's us, because we can kind of just move wherever we want. Although if we start getting together into a something that more resembles a corporation or a company, in bed with each other, then we can't move all of a sudden, because not everyone's going to be able to move in the same way. And I think whatever we choose to do, we should really fans should be supporting independent publishers, and creators should be keeping their independence as much as possible.
What I would like to see is COMICSGATE keep growing in the way it is. So I would like to see more books done by more people than a core group of people saturating the market. You know what I mean? I would rather see that, because I also think that we have more potential to grow, because they're going to possibly hit a fan base that somebody else won't. So every time somebody new comes in to COMICSGATE and starts putting out their new book, then we have potential to hit a new audience and to grow and build. If we kind of, and I think it's inevitable, like the bigger names and the people that can do it are going to start franchising their books. It's just going to happen. It's going to be a natural progression. But what I'm hoping is that we can have a combination of both, where, like Black and White, I can put out my personal Black and White stories every year, but then maybe I can put out 4 books that, I did the plot, and then another creative team, puts it together, and then we put it out, quarterly for that year. And those type of things happen. But at the same time, we keep bringing in the new voices and the new talents and the new IPs, because I do think that is the key to our success. It's not just, industry veterans saturating the market. It's going to be new people coming in, new voices, and those guys thinking outside of this box we're in right now and marketing beyond, getting their fan base and bringing new people in. And then we can keep growing that way.
So it sounds like that would be very compatible with, I don't want to mischaracterize Joe's idea, but Joe sounds like he has an idea to be a publisher to help independents with crowdfunding. It sounds like what you're proposing about your side gig there, that you do the plot and other people do the dialogue and the art, that would fit into what he's trying to do, is giving these other people a conduit to self-publish better.
Well, if I am understanding you right, like were you relating that to me, like where I was saying put out 4 Black and White books a year with another?
No. Yeah, I didn't realize that was 4 Black and Whites with another person. But take you out of the equation, and just that there are other people who want to get going out there. And I thought that was Joe's idea to not get them under one roof as a publisher, because they could say this isn't working, go take, have to take your title elsewhere, but just helping people get noticed by having a channel to go through under Joe as a publisher, that kind of thing.
Like hiring unknowns to do your book,
to do their books.
Oh,
but
in what Joe's talking about.
In your case, it's unknowns or lesser knowns to do your book, where you hand them a plot, if you follow me. It sounds very similar. The only difference being you're in control of the plots, whereas Joe might not be.
Ooh, yeah, that Kapani Patriots across another creative team would be murder on the bottom line. Yeah, and then also like a dissension, because if you pay one team more money than the other team or whatever. Yeah, I don't know, man. It sounds like a headache. Yeah.
Well, that's where it goes back to, in my mind, at any rate, is taking one step at a time and not trying to jump 10 steps ahead, and where it's trying to maintain sustainable growth. And if at some point it's not sustainable, then that would require taking a step backwards and then reevaluating, and then seeing what the viable options are, seeing what the market will support, seeing what our resources will allow us to do, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I definitely think that you have to create an IP that connects first and foremost. So once you have that, then you can think about franchising and making more books.
Before we close out, I just have one last question, and that is, why did it take so long to get you back on this channel, Artsy Bear? What the hell has been going on? Where have you been?
I'm out of
all
alcohol.
this whiskey to drink.
I'm out of
No.
alcohol. I got a new God, I don't even know how much is like vodka, so I'll probably be drinking some vodka on some of these live streams. I'm really like, I got black and white. I put notes and pages and pages and pages of notes.
The old excuse, I'm working.
I'm working.
I'm a busy independent comic book publisher, don't you know?
Yeah, I don't know. It's really hard to multitask when you're trying to write a story. You kind of have to be in the headspace of the story. So I go
sit in my car. There's no kids in there. There's no noise in there. Just you can write in there. That's like the space where I have to go to write.
Yeah. Well, my kids are grown up, so I don't have that problem. But I do have to kind of tune out the rest of the world and concentrate on just the one thing. So,
well, thank you, Art, so much for popping in and giving us a little taste of your expertise. And Joe and Blue, it's been one of my favorite conversations in a long time. This is more just kind of like a bit of a thought experiment that we've got going here. And I think the consensus is, were this to ever happen, should anyone ever want it, it wouldn't be happening right now anyway. So, let's just continue doing what we're doing, because my goodness, it's working.
Yep. What were we talking about? I think my short-term memory just ended. So
we were talking about this, the Lucent.
Oh yeah,
hey! Gotcha. It was all a trick. It was all a trick to get you to check out my book. It's still in demand, guys. Look at it. It's so close. It just wants to be at 30,000.
I think that that 30,000 by the morning is doable. That's under $300. That's
Yeah, well, you haven't seen how much it hasn't grown lately. So, but I haven't been talking about it either. I've been slacking on that. My wife was just asking me, like, why are you talking about the Lucent anymore? I've been slacking. I've been talking about other people's books. But there it is. It's available there. You can get the book or the book with the poster. I'm having a lot of fun finishing this thing off. Some of the new pages are looking, well, all of the new pages are looking fantastic, but some of them in particular, I'm just really chuffed with how they came out. But once again, thank you guys for coming on and talking about this. That was a really, really good conversation. And of course, what a chat we've had in here today. I have been barely able to keep up, but I've read every single one of your comments. And what do we say? Sexiest chat in CG. Thank you all so much for coming out. And we will see you tomorrow. All right, guys. Bye.
Take care.